This is Frankly MSP, where managed service providers get real.
Hey, and welcome to episode 23 of Frankly MSP, the podcast for managed service providers who want to boost their productivity, efficiency, and profitability. I'm your host, Jennifer Tribe. Thank you to all of you who've completed the Frankly MSP listener survey so far. There's been lots of great feedback, which we'll be using to tweak the show going forward. If you haven't completed the very short survey yet, there's still time. You have until July 31st, 2018 to do it. And remember that you might win a $25 Amazon gift card and an Auvik t-shirt for your time. You'll find the link to the survey in today's show notes at auvik.com/franklymsp/023. Today's guest on the podcast is Nick Espinosa, Chief Security Fanatic at Security Fanatics, a managed security services company that works both with MSPs and corporate clients. Nick is the host of an FM radio show and a podcast called The Deep Dive, all about security topics. He's the author of a cybersecurity book called Easy Prey, a member of the invitation-only Forbes Technology Council, and a regular Forbes contributor. He's a very busy guy, but I managed to grab a few minutes with him to chat about adding security services to an existing MSP portfolio. We talk about some of the pitfalls in layering on security services, as well as best approaches, especially with those small clients who may not have a big budget to spend. But first, let's check in with Richard Tubb and Karl Palachuk on what's going on in the world through an MSP lens.
You're listening to Frankly MSP, brought to you by Auvik Networks.
Hey folks, Richard Tubb here at home in Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of the UK. And once again, I'm back in the studio, garage. Thank you for all the feedback on the sound quality from my new studio garage. I'll be recording from here going forward. And as always, I'm joined today by my great friend and MSP expert, Karl Palachuk. Now, where in the world do we find you this week, Karl?
I am home this week putting the final touches on my membership community.
We, I think, are the only people in the IT industry at home this week because just about everybody else on the planet are in Las Vegas for Microsoft Inspire. Now, that's an event that industry veterans like you and I used to know as the Microsoft Worldwide Partner Conference. And for the uninitiated, that's an event where thousands upon thousands of Microsoft partners from around the world converge on, well, this year, as I said, Las Vegas. Now, for anyone who's never attended WPC or Microsoft Inspire, as it's now known, you've been to a few, I've been to a few. What could they expect from it, Karl?
The big picture is you can expect unbelievable number of contacts with Microsoft employees. I mean, it literally is the one place where you can actually meet people who run the programs. What's humorous for me is always that they switch up all their programs in July. And so everybody just got a new job a few weeks ago. So they have this great excuse, which is, oh, I don't have any business cards. I just changed jobs. Even though their email hasn't changed and their email address is fine, their old cards would work, but they all show up at the Microsoft Inspire with no business cards.
The annual Microsoft Shuffle, isn't it? I know I've been along to events before, Houston, Washington, D.C., other places, Microsoft WPC, the predecessor to Microsoft Inspire. And it was, to call it huge is an understatement, 25,000 attendees, perhaps more than that. In fact, the year I went along in Houston, Microsoft actually hired out a baseball stadium to house us for one of the parties. It's big.
Well, that is one of the things they do. And the UK party is just absolutely the single best party at the Microsoft event.
To the point where we won't mention any names, but after certain people attended one of the UK parties one year, the following year, Microsoft actually started asking for passports at the front door. So I won't mention which Americans came along and ruffled up that party, but the UK party is the party to go to. Well, one group who won't be attending Inspire this week, Karl, are bloggers like you and I. Did you hear the news? Microsoft have actually banned media from the event. There's no press or analysts permitted.
What a very interesting thing. I don't know if it's their intention that everyone will just be putting posts on Yammer and that will somehow get out to the rest of the world.
Well, there is a reason behind it. The Microsoft Sales Kickoff event is taking place there as well. So presumably they don't want press or analysts or bloggers in there. But as always, Karl, we've got our moles in the camp, haven't we, in the form of our MSP clients who are attending. And we're not the only one. Our friend Joe Panettiere at Channel E2E shared an Inspire story that's caught your eye this week, Karl, and will definitely be of interest to MSPs.
One of the ways that you deal with your competition is to abscond with their terminology. And so Microsoft has introduced something that they call the MSP program, the Azure Expert MSP program. And the idea is that they want to not only train you on using Azure and developing programs with Azure, but test you on it and certify you on it. So you will be Microsoft certified as a managed service provider. They're actually using that terminology. What's interesting for me is that this is clearly a cloud service provider. If it's 100% built on Azure, the focus is clearly not on the in-house stuff. And it is moving very much towards an everything as a service type of offering. And so anyway, I think it's very interesting and hits directly into what we do for a living.
The statistics are Microsoft now have more than 72,000 cloud partners. So presumably, Karl, this certification will help the expert partners rise above the pack.
Right. Well, it's also something where Microsoft loves the idea of having people provide the same solution again and again and again. And for many, many years, they had this very obtuse cloud approach. Remember, what's his name saying, to the cloud, right? There was actually nothing there except, hey, we've got some stuff in the cloud. A lot of people equate Azure with a hosted server environment. But Microsoft is moving very much away from these hosted server environment to hosted services. They don't want you to put up a hosted Exchange server. They want you to put up hosted Exchange mailboxes on someone's Exchange platform and enterprise platform.
I'm interested with this story as well, the certification. To give you some insight, listeners, into what this looks like, apparently Azure Expert MSPs are going to be required to complete a rigorous 2-day on-site audit by an independent third party and provide multiple customer references of Azure managed service projects delivered over the past year. And also, to maintain a credential, the MSP partner must meet annual prerequisites and complete a progress audit every year. That sounds quite serious. This is not just an exam to pass, is it, Karl?
We used to be a Microsoft certified partner. And part of what you had to do back in the day was to say, not only have we got the experience with server or desktops or whatever the certification was in, but you had to pass multiple exams, and then you had to have them interview your clients and demonstrate that you had actually delivered the services that you said you had. So this is literally a step up from that, to have this third-party audit, so that you can't just fill out the paperwork, describe your project, but really it turned out to be you put one server in one room and you were done.
So it's going to be interesting to see how many MSPs take this up. I applaud this move because you do want to enable MSPs to stand out from the crowd and say, we don't just talk about knowing our stuff. This is the proof that we do know our stuff and we get on and do it each and every day.
Yes. Well, and Microsoft is moving very heavily to having their certifications focused around programming and not hardware. It used to be that you would get a certification in something like Small Business Server or Windows Server or Windows Desktop. And those were all specific pieces of software or operating systems. Now, all of the certifications have moved to being developing in the cloud, developing software, developing this, developing that. They really have moved their partner program, their partner community, to being one focused on programmers and developers.
And while we're talking about hardware, this is just a rumor, a whisper I heard from my moles at Inspire. Although if you follow my Twitter feed, you can pretty much work out where this came from. So nothing concrete yet, but could Microsoft be preparing to develop specialized hardware that runs Azure cloud services? So there's been a little bit of whispering. I heard some prominent Microsoft staff have recently moved to the Azure hardware division. Would Microsoft benefit from producing their own hardware, Karl, or does this have Zune written all over it, for instance?
Well, remember their most recent reorganization where they eliminated the Windows Server department altogether and replaced it with Windows and devices. So yes, I think that given that they've given up on phones, they have to have some devices in mind. And my guess is it's not just Xbox, but it's going to be devices that are going to be far more plug and play with regard to cloud services than what we've seen before.
So if you're an MSP in the Azure space, good news, lots of good stuff coming down the pipe for you. If you're not an MSP who is using Azure at the moment, maybe you should sit up and pay attention after this Microsoft Inspire. I want to move things forward a little bit, Karl. Another news story of interest to MSPs coming out of Inspire this week is that Microsoft has taken steps to increase the value of its Office 365 Business Premium subscription. They've added a number of applications to it that I think are going to help businesses with marketing and finances. So I'll just run through what they've added. They've added Microsoft Connections. It's an email marketing platform which features templates for newsletters, announcements, and so forth. Interestingly, it's an email marketing platform that also allows segmentation. So if you've done any email marketing before, you'll appreciate the value of that. There's also analytics within the platform that shows you performance charts and subscriber activity updates, such as you can track open rates, clicks, new signups, new customers, unsubscribe numbers for every email campaign you do. So you can see what is and what isn't working. Were you aware of Microsoft Connections before this announcement, Karl?
I knew that it existed, but it's one of these things where I've used Constant Contact and other people have used MailChimp and others for so many years that I didn't have a reason to look at it. One of the things that I'm hoping that these services are going to move towards is basically putting in some steps to say, if you do these simple things, these 3 things or these 5 things, we will guarantee that you are GDPR compliant or you are whatever the rules are that you have to comply with, because that's a layer of confusion that so many people just don't want to deal with. And the suspicion is that if you don't handle it right, you and I and everybody else who's trying to market out there are going to lose about 50% of our subscribers in the next 2 years, simply because of compliance issues and the ease with which people can opt out and choose not to opt back in simply in the transition to having all these rules.
We could fill a whole episode with the G word, GDPR, talking about that. Back to this Microsoft offering and what they've added to the Office 365 Premium subscription. They've also added a product that I wasn't aware existed, but actually looks really quite useful to small businesses. It's called Microsoft Listings. And it basically keeps up to date with your business listings, not only on Bing, Microsoft's search engine, but also on Facebook, Google, and even Yelp, useful for US businesses. So you can monitor your views and reviews from all of those listings all in one location. That's really quite cool, isn't it, I think?
That's very handy. And again, that gets into a whole different area where people are making money on reputation management, right? This makes it much easier for you to do that in-house instead of hiring somebody else to manage your reputation.
Yeah, so these are all additions to the Office 365 Business Premium subscription. The reason I think it's interesting for MSPs, if you're not already offering that type of subscription to clients, this is truly where you can start adding some value in. There's going to be plenty of clients who have never, ever done any email marketing. And so you can start adding some value, some consultancy around that. And of course, the vast majority of small businesses that I come across have never even considered that they should have a listing on Facebook or Bing or Google, let alone Yelp. But there's a lot of value, especially for retail stores, to be having that. So great opportunities for the MSPs to finally look at Office 365 and say, well, we're not really going to make any money on the markup on the sales, but there's certainly some consultancy opportunities.
You know how I feel. I resell Microsoft Office through resellers and bundle it with other things. And I have all kinds of money I make off of that. So I don't buy the argument that Microsoft gets to have me give their stuff away for free and not make any money. But I also believe that the opportunity to do consulting and to get back to what our industry should be doing, which is a lot more consulting rather than pushing boxes and building machines. We need to build that business communication with our clients in order for them to find value in us, so that when we charge them the monthly fee, the monthly recurring revenue, they have some reason to get value out of it. And that's far more visible when you're doing consulting, actual business consulting.
Absolutely. Now, going back to this story about Office 365 Business Premium and the additional applications, one more of note application I think that Microsoft have added, and that's Microsoft Invoicing. For businesses that don't need a full accounting suite, say like QuickBooks, Microsoft Invoicing might be beneficial. So you're able to create, edit, send invoices, and even accept payments, not only from your desk, but while on the go. Microsoft Invoicing works with PayPal. That opens up credit cards and debit card payments as well. I think the ability to create and send invoices in the moment from your smartphone is going to be able to help every small business keep track of work they've performed at clients and ensure they actually get billed as well. So interesting that Microsoft, I think they've really beefed up the Office 365 Business Premium subscription with those offerings.
But what's interesting in the big picture is that Microsoft used to take all their stuff and put it into a bigger and bigger and bigger package until it became a $300 or $400 or $800 package. And what they're doing now is saying, look, there's all these little things that people have gotten used to buying separately. And so we can just compete with them separately. We can just say, oh, here's a thing that does that. Here's a thing that does that. We'll just throw it into our bundle. You know, it looks like it doesn't really cost you anything extra to send invoicing. But now all those transactions, Microsoft gets a penny on the dollar or whatever it is. That's a brilliant move by them.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm really impressed with this. And just to close the loop on it for any questions that people have got, these new business apps they're all built to work together. So this isn't the case, Microsoft have just given you access to their applications. You don't have to build complicated connections between the apps. So for instance, a contact in one of these business apps is automatically recognized in another. There's no input in data multiple times. I think this is a huge change from Microsoft and one for the better. So definitely something we'll keep our eye on. If you were selling Office 365 Business Premium to your customers, Karl, would this make it more attractive, or do you prefer using the best of breed individual solutions?
Well, I do prefer best of breed, but if Microsoft competes with that, I mean, it's sort of like if I say I'm going to put into my bundle invoicing, well, I can do that with Square or something over here. But if it integrates seamlessly with Microsoft and it costs me nothing extra, then I'm just going to add that to my bundle and keep the extra money, keep the extra profit.
Yeah, so interesting. Microsoft Inspire this week, as we record this, we're a couple of days into the event. So, Karl, are you going to keep your moles feeding you back information, and I'll do the same? And maybe if we got any more big stories coming out of Inspire, we can cover them on the next What's Going On podcast.
Very good.
Fantastic. Well, that's what's been going on. That's all for now. We'll speak to you next time.
You're listening to Frankly MSP.
As always, I'll put links to the resources Karl and Richard discuss in today's show notes at avic.com/franklymsp/023. Now we come to my interview with Nick Espinosa, author, speaker, radio show host, and all-around cybersecurity expert. Today we're talking about best practices in adding cybersecurity services to an existing MSP portfolio. Hi, Nick. Welcome to Frankly MSP.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. Well, today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, which is something that is on everyone's radar these days. We're seeing the rise of MSSPs, managed security service providers, who are dedicated to delivering security services and solving security problems for their clients. But we're also seeing in the media from analysts and from coaches a push for MSPs, managed service providers, to add security offerings to their existing portfolio of services. What's your take on this?
First off, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. And yeah, I actually have quite a bit of thoughts on this because it kind of is a double-edged sword. While a lot of IT companies are that trusted advisor in terms of technology choices, decisions, and cybersecurity for the businesses and clients that they cater to, a lot of MSPs have not actually invested a lot of time, education, learning, and understanding on advanced cyber defense strategies. And so, while I think it's very important that they start to ramp this up, I think it really needs to be balanced in terms of understanding that not all solutions are the same, that good choices have to be made and they have to come from experience, which is one of the things that we help MSPs with. But in terms of adding services, the problem that we've seen with MSPs is that a lot of times the cybersecurity solutions that they're offering tend to be more of the mid-level or lower mid-level, which is oftentimes not necessarily an adequate defense solution. There are firewalls, for example, that have on paper the exact same specs as, let's say, a tier 1 enterprise level firewall, but they don't defend nearly as effectively. And that's the problem I think that a lot of MSPs have. But overall, MSPs should absolutely be working on improving their cybersecurity and increasing their effectiveness in that. And if we're looking at it from a most basic level, if you're walking into a client that has a router they bought at Best Buy and all of that, if you're installing, let's say, a mid-level cybersecurity solution, that is infinitely better than what they have before. But there's also room for improvement. The way I like to talk to my audiences about this is that, I can go on Amazon and I can order karate pajamas and a black belt, and I can put it on and walk around, and everybody's going to say, oh, there's a black belt walking around. But as soon as I get into the ring with an actual black belt, I'm going to get my butt kicked. And I think that there are MSPs out there that definitely fall into that category in terms of their effectiveness. While they can walk the walk, they're not talking the talk. And fortunately, I think we're seeing a real push in the MSP community to actually start walking the walk, which is a really good thing.
Do you think that MSPs are in over their head? Is that what the issue is, that they just don't know what they don't know? Or is it a budget issue with their clients?
I think it's a little bit of everything. You don't necessarily know what you don't know. And in that sense, yeah, I think there are a lot of MSPs out there that while they're learning or they've got some basic understanding of this, they may not necessarily know advanced cyber defense strategies. And I think the other issue that we have with this is that a lot of the products that they're using, I think, are budget conscious, which is not exactly the best choice when we are talking about a cyber defense strategy. And we can use a basic example. So a foundation of a cyber defense strategy is a firewall. It is the most critical thing. And if we are putting in a solution that has, let's say, it's 90% effective compared to a tier 1 solution, well, that's a 10% gap in the cyber defense strategy right out of the gate. And this is unfortunately what we're seeing in the MSP world, is that a lot of the products, technologies, and solutions are not offering the same capability as, let's say, defending a Fortune 100 company, when the reality is that a lot of the products that the Fortune 100 companies use, those advanced products, are actually affordable at the MSP level. They may be more complex. They may have a greater learning curve. They are available to the MSP, and the MSP is not picking it up. And I see that as a serious problem.
Why do you think they're not picking up those solutions?
Well, part of it, I think, is budget. We can go to conferences, any conference, where they say, oh, you act now and you'll get a firewall for free if you buy the licensing for 3 years kind of stuff. And that's very enticing because the profit margin on something like that is significantly better than, it would be if working with a larger, more expensive, more complex product. I think that's a big issue in our world. I think we also have a sense of complacency, or rather a lot of MSPs have a sense of complacency that, we've worked with X brand for the last 10 years and we just keep getting the latest and greatest model. And that ends up being the detriment, because maybe that company that you're using their models from has not kept up with their competitors in the market. And there are some big names out there that are offering cybersecurity solutions in terms of firewalls and infrastructure that are a couple of years behind the tier 1 companies that are doing dedicated cybersecurity development for their products. So that tends to be a big issue as well. And it's very tough when you're looking at this thinking, I have to spend a lot of soft and hard dollars to invest in time, equipment, education, money. So it's just easier for me to stick with what I know. And my clients are getting basically what is considered an adequate defense. And in cybersecurity, it's one of those few industries where a zero-sum game, I think, is the most important thing, because, again, you don't want to have gaps in your cyber defense or potential loss in your cyber defense right out of the gate, purely due to product choice.
But for a lot of small clients, they are on a small budget, right? So if you're working with, say, a restaurant, they have notoriously thin margins. They're probably not going to want to invest a great deal in cybersecurity, and yet they do have sensitive information dealing with credit card numbers and so on. So what is good enough for them within their budget? What's adequate for them?
I will tell you this. I have walked into 10 user networks and sold them $10,000 firewalls, because they recognize the value and they understand the need to keep their compliant data secure or keep them free from infections so they don't have work outages. And not to mention the fact that it helps to improve my reputation when they're not getting breached and their competitors are. To your point, it's a difficult road, especially for the MSP, because you're going to have a lot of small businesses that have thin margins that are not necessarily willing to invest or don't necessarily see why they should. And I think, one, it's imperative that the MSP has that mindset in sales where they are able to properly convey the threats out there to these businesses. But two, you don't necessarily need to invest in tier one to have a good cyber defense strategy. I mean, if you're selling them a mid-level solution where they had no solution at all, they are absolutely better off, but still the gap is huge. And we can look at real numbers for this to see why this is an ever-exploding problem. If we're looking at 2017, last year, we had over 2,200 breaches totaling over 6 billion records exposed from major organizations and corporations. And there's 2 points about that number that you need to understand. One, 2,200 is a mere fraction of the actual breaches out there because most companies don't report this. They just don't report breaches. And that 2,200 number is for the first 6 months of last year alone. That doesn't include Equifax and a slew of other breaches. And in 2018, we are on track to beat that. And so if we are looking at this and we are trying to convey this message to our clients, it is imperative that they understand that we are not trying to oversell them a solution. We are trying to protect them, their reputation, their uptime so they don't have work stoppages. All of these things are in their best interests. And you can also set up things like hardware as a service and other things to mitigate that upfront cost that more expensive equipment and more defendable equipment might bring you. But at the end of the day, what it really is going to come down to is the capability of the MSP to sell this, as well as convey that message of why it is so important, even to that small business that may not necessarily want to spend the money, even if they've got it.
Let's say you're going to a small business client and they say you recommend a solution, a firewall, a strategy. It's $10,000, let's say. And they're like, you know what? I see your point, but I really don't have that money to spend. I've got $3,000. Should you, as the MSP, walk away from that because you can't deliver the security that you think is appropriate? Or do you try and work with them at that lower level?
I will give you this real life example of exactly that. I did walk into a client and I said, okay, you need a firewall and it's going to be, we'll use your example, it's going to be $10,000. And they said, that is awfully expensive. We don't want to spend that. Do you have anything cheaper? And my default response was, there are absolutely cheaper solutions out there, and I'm more than happy to set you up with a colleague that will give you that solution. Because if I am selling a cybersecurity solution, it's not just my ability to defend them to the best of my ability given the available products, it's also my reputation out there. And I am not going to, as a pure cybersecurity professional, I am not going to install an inadequate cyber defense strategy and put my reputation on the line for that. I'm the first to admit that, like when I first started out, I started my first business in 98 and I was doing cybersecurity projects. And on the side, I was doing IT, and the IT was a steady paycheck and the projects were, good money. But I would go into my IT clients and they'd be like, yeah, we're not going to pay for that. And then I would compromise. Okay, well, we'll do half of this or we'll do something like this. And now that I'm looking at this and I'm in a position where I have the ability to do pure cybersecurity work, I am seeing this and saying, I cannot offer this. You're either defended or you're not. And if you're not defended to the best of your ability, then you are just literally creating gaps in your cyber defense strategy that a hacker is going to drive a truck through. And I am not going to design that, implement that, or support that because I'm not going to put my name to that. And that is a philosophical question that a lot of MSPs are going to have to answer this, because they may be installing their version of a cyber defense strategy, and they're going to have to stand by that. And when the ransomware gets through, or a hacker gets in, or data is exfiltrated, or whatever happens, basically the client is going to call them and say, what the heck, man? You sold this to us, you installed this, why didn't this work? We need to have standards, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. We need to have standards that we adhere to. And if the client or the potential client is not willing to meet those standards, then quite frankly, the client's probably not a good fit.
If you're a small business, you're on a shoestring budget, do you just throw up your hands and say, well, what am I going to do?
No. And here's why. Because if you're a small business, odds are you're hoping that you're going to grow and you're going to improve. And if a stepping stone for you is to go from absolutely no defense to, let's say, a mid-level defense, you are significantly better off than if you have nothing. The point is that you look at a total cyber defense strategy built on an excellent framework. And that is kind of like the shining city on the hill, if you will. And you're at the bottom of the hill and you've got to climb it. It takes time. And so you don't necessarily have to go from 0 to 100 immediately. You can pick up a product here, a product there. And over time, as you are slowly adding to your cyber defense strategy, you are slowly hardening and improving your defenses. Just understand that mid-level product is eventually going to turn into a much better product as you gain the funds. But no, we should never throw our hands up because there's always something we can do to defend ourselves at any budget. We just have to make sure we are constantly moving the ball forward to get the best possible defense out there.
That's interesting. And it may be a way for MSPs to sell smaller clients on that bigger strategy by phasing it in over the course of, say, 6 months or a year. So gradual upgrades.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if you can get your foot in the door with one product, then you can usually get your foot in the door with 2 or 3. If I'm looking at having to grow a cyber defense strategy for a company over time, I'm going to start with the best possible firewall I can get. And then from there, ramp up other things, like antivirus and other intrusion detection systems and policies and education and all of that. It can take time, but as long as you're constantly putting your best foot forward always incrementally over that time period, then you're going to continuously defend your client significantly better than if you do nothing, or if you're selling them absolutely everything at once, but everything is like a mid-level product that has gaps in it right out of the gate.
If I'm an MSP and I want to benchmark my security offerings in terms of like, here's what I know, but here's my knowledge gap, here's what I'm offering to clients, but here's maybe what I should be recommending to clients. Is there any place where they can get that information or sort of make that self-assessment?
You can do a couple of different things. When we're looking at actual products, a great place to start, one of my first stops when I'm doing research is looking at Gartner. Gartner has the Magic Quadrant. And I always like to look on whatever the product is. And Gartner has a million different product categories, firewalls and SaaS and everything else. Who's in the leadership quadrant and why? I do research into any product that I look at. I'm also willing to switch products in a heartbeat. If something comes out that is infinitely more defendable or has more performance than any of the products I'm using right now, I am more than happy to switch to that product, which includes investing in time and training and all of that. But I usually start at Gartner. And then from there, I am looking at various products. I'm also looking at some of the major companies out there that do dedicated cybersecurity work. We at Security Fanatics obviously do dedicated cybersecurity work, but it's important to see what our competitors are doing, like CrowdStrike or Cylance or any one of these companies, what they are saying, what their products are offering. You can read blogs from them. You can look at podcasts, all this kind of stuff. And as long as you are keeping up that information, you're going to have a much better understanding of where you are in cybersecurity versus what these companies are doing. Every morning I wake up and I read cybersecurity news, and it's not just like the threats out there and the data breaches, it's the innovations of new hacking techniques. It's the research papers that are coming out of colleges to say, hey, we found a new way to break into something or override something or whatever that is. And that keeps me informed and up to date. It's really important just to have that baseline for education. So read cybersecurity news, check out top tier cybersecurity players like CrowdStrike, Cylance, FireEye. Keep yourself informed. And that will give you, I think, a really good baseline to what you are doing versus what a dedicated cybersecurity company is doing.
Realistically, if you're an MSP not offering security services today and you're looking to get into this space, it's a huge area, obviously needs some very specialized skills. Can you realistically hope to add security as one of multiple services, or do you really need to be looking at either becoming a dedicated security outfit or partnering with one?
It's important to understand where your strengths and your weaknesses are in any business. And it's also important to understand that IT, like just standard IT work, is married to cybersecurity. In this day and age, you cannot have IT work with cybersecurity work. And if your company is, let's say, dedicated to IT and is selling a very basic cybersecurity solution that isn't necessarily, an industry standard or based on a solid cybersecurity framework, then that may be something that you're either going to have to make the choice to, one, invest the time, money, and training to get those products, to get that knowledge, to actually offer that, or ideally you're going to partner with somebody that is going to have that. We have it. We have an MSP. We also have the MSSP, and they are kind of mutually exclusive in the sense of what they do, but we help each other out. So the cyber defense strategies from the security side trickle into the IT side, and then the infrastructure from the IT side can trickle into the cybersecurity side. But if you don't take that time and to invest, to learn, to train, to build that out with knowledge, education, and the right products, then I would highly recommend outsourcing that with a trusted partner that can help you with that.
Parting advice for an MSP who's looking to add security services to their offerings.
Do your homework, do your research, look at the products that are out there and find out which ones are the best. Look at industry professionals and experts, figure out what they use. I mean, I have people constantly contact me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, saying, Nick, what do you use for a firewall? Or what do you use for antivirus, et cetera. And I'm more than happy to share that knowledge because at the end of the day, I just want to help people. And so if you are going to ramp this up, understand that you need to train, you need to have education, you need to pick the best possible products, looking at things like Gartner's Magic Quadrant. Typically, when we're looking at this, we're looking at what the top tier corporations are doing because they spend a ton of money on cyber defense strategies. And typically what they're buying is the best. And that tends to be in the Gartner's leadership quadrant. So that's a good place to start. But you can buy all the products in the world, but you have to educate yourself on this and you have to start getting into the mindset of a cybersecurity professional. And once you start doing that, I mean, one, the world becomes a slightly darker place. I'm not going to lie, but that darkness, if you will, is going to give you better insight to how a hacker is going to innovate around any cyber defense strategy that you can put up.
That's great advice. Thanks so much for joining us today, Nick.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That was Nick Espinosa, CEO at Security Fanatics. Nick mentioned keeping up with cybersecurity news, and his podcast, The Deep Dive with Nick Espinosa, is great for that. Each episode is an hour-long look at the latest news developments and trends in cybersecurity. He also posts regular videos, I think weekly, to his Facebook page, which are also great for keeping up with the news. In his interview, Nick mentioned that he's open to questions from you about specific vendors, such as firewall vendors that he recommends. So I'll put his contact info in the show notes for today at avic.com/franklymsp/023 in case you want to reach out. And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed this show, remember to subscribe to Frankly MSP in iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get each episode as it drops. Till next time, this is Jennifer Tribe. Thanks for listening.
Frankly MSP, brought to you by Avic Networks, the most efficient and profitable way to manage your clients' networks.